They never hit you. They never screamed at you. They simply stopped talking to you. And somehow, that silence hurt worse than anything they could have ever said or done. What you just experienced was one of the most psychologically sophisticated weapons a human being can use against another. Most people have no idea how dark it actually gets. Today, we are going deep. We mean truly deep into one of the most misunderstood and minimized behaviors. This behavior is also one of the most psychologically destructive in human relationships. We are talking about the silent treatment. Not the version where someone needs a few hours to calm down before a conversation. Not the healthy pause someone takes to gather their thoughts before speaking. We are talking about the deliberate, calculated, sustained withdrawal of communication. This is used as a tool of control, punishment, and manipulation. We are talking about the dark psychology that sits behind those walls of silence. We will also explore why it works so effectively on the human mind and heart. Before we go further, I want you to understand something. If you have ever been on the receiving end of this, you are not weak for how deeply it affected you. You are not overthinking it. You are not being dramatic. What you felt was real. What it did to your mind was also real. The damage it caused was as real as any wound you can see with your eyes. The fact that no one around you could see it does not mean it did not exist. So let us begin at the very beginning. Let us address the most fundamental question. What is a silent treatment? Really? At its most basic surface level, we understand it as the refusal to engage in communication with someone. It might mean ignoring phone calls. It might mean looking through a person as if they are invisible. It might mean being in the same house. People might eat at the same table or share the same bed. Yet, the silenced person remains absolutely, completely, and devastatingly alone. It might be delivered through cold, monosyllabic responses. It might be communicated through averted eyes and the deliberate turning of a back. In its most extreme form, it is total exclusion from another person's existence. The person is treated as if they do not exist. Their presence seems to have no value. The person is considered utterly invisible and worthless. Psychologists use a broader, more clinical term for this behavior. It is called ostracism. Ostracism is not a modern phenomenon. It is as old as human civilization itself. It is rooted deeply in the architecture of society. You can trace this practice across thousands of years of human history. The ancient Greeks actually practiced a formal version of it. Citizens who were considered threats to democracy could be expelled from the city. This exile lasted for 1 decade. The process was called ostracism, which is quite literally where the word comes from. Early American settlers used banishment against people accused of practicing witchcraft. The Catholic Church calls it excommunication. In Judaism, there is a concept called haram. This is considered the most severe form of punishment available. The Amish practice something they call meat. This involves the complete shunning of a person who violates the community's rules. The Church of Scientology recommends total disconnection from anyone deemed an enemy of the faith. Every major civilization, every organized religion, and every structured society across human history has recognized one thing. Being cut off from your people is a devastating punishment. Being erased from the social fabric is equally impactful. This is one of the most severe punishments one can inflict. Not because people are fragile, it is because of how we are literally wired at a biological and neurological level. We are a deeply social species. The human brain did not evolve in isolation. It evolved in communities, in tribes, and in groups. In these groups, social belonging was not a luxury. It was a survival necessity. Being exiled from your group in ancient environments was not just uncomfortable, it was a death sentence. You could not hunt alone as effectively. You could not protect yourself alone. You could not raise children alone. Social connection was survival itself. Because of this, over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, the human brain developed an extraordinarily sensitive alarm system. This system was specifically designed to detect social rejection and exclusion. It registers such events as a threat equal to physical danger. That alarm system does not distinguish between being chased by a predator and being ignored by a person you love. To your nervous system, both are emergencies. Both trigger the same basic survival response. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. In a landmark study, a neuroscientist named Naomi Eisenberger and her colleagues used functional magnetic resonance imaging. This is also known as F. They scanned the brains of people experiencing social exclusion. What they found was extraordinary. When a person was being socially excluded, 2 specific brain regions lit up with intense activity. These were the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, also known as the DACC, and the anterior insula. Here is why that matters. These are the exact same brain regions that respond to physical pain. Not similar regions. Not neighboring regions. The same regions. The human brain, quite literally, does not draw a clean line. It sees no difference between the pain of a broken bone and the pain of being ignored by someone you love. Social rejection and physical injury activate the same neural architecture. This is why receiving the silent treatment cannot be simply thought away. You cannot logic yourself into not feeling it. It is not weakness. It is biology. At the neurochemical level, social pain and exclusion have been directly linked to changes in both opioid activity and dopamine activity. This means changes at the level of brain chemistry. These are the same neurotransmitter systems that govern how your body manages physical pain. They also regulate social bonding. When someone you love and trust deploys silence against you, your brain registers a wound. It floods your system with the same distress signals that physical trauma creates. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, surges. Your body enters a heightened state of alert. Heart rate elevates, muscles tense, and the mind races. The threat is not something you can run from or fight. The source of the pain is right in front of you. This person pretends you do not exist. Therefore, that physical stress response has nowhere to go. It just stays in your body, day after day, eating at you from the inside. Now, let us talk about the psychology of why people do this. Here is where things get genuinely dark. The reasons for this behavior are not always the same. Understanding the difference between those reasons is absolutely critical. It helps you understand what kind of situation you are actually in. On the least damaging end of the spectrum, some people use the silent treatment. They genuinely lack the emotional vocabulary to express what they are feeling. They are overwhelmed and flooded. They are unable to put language to the intensity of what is happening inside them. Silence becomes a default for them, not a weapon. This is the person who shuts down in arguments. They were never taught how to regulate emotions or communicate conflict. They are not doing it to hurt you. They are doing it because they are drowning inside themselves. Silence feels like the only life raft they have. Then there are people who use it as conflict avoidance. They are afraid. They fear confrontation, vulnerability, or saying the wrong thing. They are also afraid of the intensity of their own emotions. These people retreat into silence. Engaging feels genuinely dangerous to them psychologically. Their nervous systems have learned that conflict equals catastrophic outcomes. This often comes from childhood experiences. Withdrawal into silence is a protection mechanism. It is a way to keep the walls up and the danger out. But then we move further along the spectrum, and the psychology becomes significantly darker. There is the silent treatment used as punishment. This is no longer accidental. This is no longer a coping mechanism born from genuine helplessness. This is deliberate. This is calculated. This is the conscious decision to withhold communication. The goal is to make someone feel the weight of your disapproval. It makes them suffer for what they did. It also aims to extract compliance through pain. When someone uses silence as punishment, they are sending a clear message. Your access to me is conditional. You must earn my words. You must earn my acknowledgement. And if you displease me, I can erase you. The silence is the punishment. The silence is the sentence. And you, the person receiving it, are supposed to sit in the discomfort of that silence. This continues until you break. It continues until you come crawling, until you apologize, and until you give them what they want. And this is where we arrive at the truly dark psychology at the core of this behavior. That core is power and control. The silent treatment is, at its most manipulative form, a sophisticated mechanism of dominance. Think about what it does with the power dynamic in a relationship. The person giving the silent treatment has complete control over when it ends. They set the terms, they decide if and when communication is restored. They hold all the cards. The person on the receiving end is stripped of agency. They cannot force a conversation. They cannot resolve a conflict unilaterally. They are entirely dependent on the silence giver's decision to read. This is a profoundly unequal power dynamic. It is engineered to be exactly that. The goal, whether consciously understood or not, is to destabilize the other person. It aims to make them feel anxious, confused, desperate, and ultimately compliant. And it works. That is perhaps the most disturbing part. It works with devastating efficiency. What happens to the mind of the person being silenced? They begin to spiral. They replay every interaction, every word, every action. They search for what they did wrong. They begin to question their perception of reality. They ask themselves if they were wrong. They wonder if they are overreacting. They consider whether they should apologize. This happens even if they do not know what they are apologizing for. The anxiety builds. The need for resolution becomes overwhelming. The need for connection becomes so painful. This need is biologically wired into every human being. As a result, the targeted person will often do almost anything to end the silence. This includes accepting blame for things they did not do. It includes abandoning their own needs. It also includes completely surrendering their position in a conflict, even when they were entirely in the right. A psychology professor at Purdue University named Kipling Williams spent over 36 years researching this very phenomenon. He interviewed hundreds of people, including both victims and perpetrators. He documented stories that are heartbreaking in their depth. One woman's father refused to speak to her for months at a time. This was a punishment throughout her entire childhood. Her father died during one of these extended silences. She went to the hospital to see him. Even on his deathbed, he turned away from her. He refused to speak to her. She did not even get a goodbye. One father gave his teenage son the silent treatment. He watched the boy transform from a vibrant, happy child. The father himself described the boy as becoming a spineless jellyfish. He knew he was the cause. A wife's husband stopped speaking to her after a minor disagreement early in their marriage. He never started again. She endured 40 years of eating meals alone. She watched television alone. She was invisible inside her own home until her husband died. That was 40 years. When Williams asked her why she stayed, she simply stated a reason. She said that at least her husband kept a roof over her head. These are not edge cases. These are the depths that this behavior can reach when it is left unchecked and unaddressed. 1 out of every 3 people has used the silent treatment against someone in their lives. Even more people have had it used against them. He also identified something critically important. This was why the silent treatment is appealing to certain types of people. It serves as a tool of manipulation for them. He said, people use the silent treatment. They can get away with it without looking abusive to others. There are no bruises. There is no raised voice that neighbors can hear. No dramatic scene can be photographed or documented. There is just silence. Silence is almost impossible to prove to an outsider. It is a form of abuse that hides itself perfectly. It leaves no visible marks. It can be denied, minimized, and dismissed. The abuser simply claims they needed some space. This makes it insidious. This makes it dangerous. Now, let us talk about the connection between the silent treatment and narcissistic personality disorder. This is where the dark psychology becomes truly clinical. Not every person who gives the silent treatment is a narcissist. However, the silent treatment is one of the most signature behaviors. It is seen in individuals with narcissistic traits or a full narcissistic personality disorder. Understanding why requires understanding how narcissists fundamentally experience relationships. A person with narcissistic personality disorder has a profound need for control. They also crave admiration and a sense of superiority over others. They experience relationships not as partnerships between equals. Instead, they see power structures where they must always be dominant. When someone challenges them, they react strongly. This also happens when someone questions their behavior. Expressing personal needs or failing to provide constant admiration and validation also triggers them. The narcissist then experiences what psychologists call narcissistic injury. This injury is a wound to their ego. It can feel existentially threatening. The response to this injury is almost always some form of punishment. The silent treatment is one of their most effective and frequently deployed punishments. The narcissistic silent treatment operates on a different level than ordinary conflict avoidance. It is not about the narcissist needing space to calm down. It is calculated. It is time. It is deployed with a specific intention of causing maximum psychological discomfort. The narcissist has learned this through experience and observation. They carefully study what breaks people. They know silence is devastatingly effective. It makes others feel small, worthless, desperate, and compliant. They use it to punish you for expressing an unwanted boundary. They also use it to punish you for refusing to give them what they want. This behavior helps reset the power dynamic. It happens after you show any sign of independence or backbone. They use it as a tool to condition you. This teaches your nervous system a lesson. Expressions of autonomous selfhood, they believe, lead to withdrawal of love and connection. Compliance and submission, in contrast, lead to warmth and engagement. This conditioning process is deeply linked to a concept. It is called intermittent reinforcement in behavioral psychology. This is one of the most powerful mechanisms. It explains why people stay in relationships with chronic silent treatment users. Intermittent reinforcement means the reward comes in consistently and unpredictably. This reward includes love, warmth, attention, and connection. Sometimes the silence lifts. Then the person is warm, affectionate, even loving. Other times, it does not. You never know which version of them you will get, or when. Research in behavioral psychology shows us this. Going back to the foundational work of B.F. Skinner, intermittent reinforcement creates the most persistent behavior patterns. It also creates the most compulsive patterns. It is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You do not stop pulling the lever. This is because it occasionally pays out. You never know which pull will be the winning one. Applied to human relationships, intermittent reinforcement of love and withdrawal creates a trauma bond. This is an emotional attachment. It is paradoxically strengthened, not weakened, by the relationship's pain and unpredictability. This is why victims of chronic silent treatment abuse often feel more intensely bonded to the person hurting them. Leaving feels psychologically impossible, even when the rational mind understands staying is destructive. The trauma bond is further cemented by the abuse cycle itself. The cycle typically follows a recognizable pattern. This pattern includes idealization, devaluation, and discard. Periodic hoovers occur in between these phases. During idealization, the relationship feels extraordinary. The person is warm, attentive, and seemingly perfect. Your emotional needs are met, sometimes lavishly. During devaluation, criticism begins, and contempt creeps in. The silent treatment then appears as punishment. During the discard phase, you are ignored and treated as worthless. You are made to feel as though you never mattered. Then the hoover pulls you back in. This term is named after the vacuum cleaner. The hoover brings renewed warmth, affection, and charm. It resets the cycle from the beginning. Each time the silence ends and warmth returns, the victim's overwhelmed nervous system experiences profound relief. That relief, that break from the pain, registers in the brain as euphoria. It is almost identical to the high a drug addict experiences after withdrawal. The brain associates the person causing the pain with also ending it. This dual role of torturer and rescuer creates one of the most powerful attachments. It forms one of the most dangerous psychological attachments the human mind is capable of forming. Now, let us bring attachment theory into this conversation. It is absolutely fundamental to understanding who is most affected by the silent treatment and why. Attachment theory was developed by psychologist John Bowlby. Mary Ainsworth later expanded it. It tells us that early childhood attachment to caregivers sets a template. This template guides how we attach in all significant relationships throughout our lives. Children with consistent, warm, and responsive caregivers tend to develop secure attachment. These caregivers showed up reliably. They grew up learning that relationships are safe. They learned that expressing needs does not lead to abandonment. They also learned that disagreements do not equal the end of connection. However, children who experience inconsistent parenting often develop anxious attachment. Their caregivers were sometimes warm and present. At other times, these caregivers were cold, distant, or punishing. These individuals grow up with a profound, deep-seated fear of abandonment. They are hypervigilant to signals of rejection. They struggle to feel secure in relationships. This is true even when relationships are objectively safe. Because of this, they are extraordinarily vulnerable to the silent treatment. When silence descends, the anxiously attached person does not just feel uncomfortable. They feel the full terror of abandonment. Every childhood wound is ripped open. The need to reconnect, resolve, and fix becomes overwhelming. They will do almost anything to make the silence end. This includes completely abandoning their own position, truth, or needs. Then there is the avoidantly attached person. This is someone who learned in childhood that expressing emotional needs was not safe. It often led to rejection. These individuals grow up defending themselves against emotional intimacy. They keep their feelings tightly contained. They avoid vulnerability. They are often the ones who choose silence when conflict arises. For them, engagement feels more dangerous than withdrawal. This is important to understand. It means the demand-withdraw pattern is often a perfect storm. In this pattern, one partner pushes for connection and communication. The other retreats into silence. It represents two incompatible attachment styles colliding. One person's desperate need for resolution triggers the other person's defensive withdrawal. This withdrawal then triggers even greater desperation in the first person. This, in turn, triggers even deeper withdrawal. It is a cycle that escalates itself. Each loop makes the dynamic more painful and more entrenched. Renowned couples therapist Dr. John Gottman spent decades studying couples in his research laboratory. He could predict divorce with startling accuracy. This was based on patterns of communication. He identified stonewalling as one of the four most dangerous patterns in a relationship. Stonewalling is his term for the withdrawal into silence. He called these patterns the Four Horsemen. These were criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. He described them as predictors of relational apocalypse. Dr. Gottman found stonewalling particularly it represented a total shutdown of communication. The person who stonewalls is not just refusing to engage in a single argument. Over time, they are eroding the entire foundation of trust and emotional safety. They also erode the mutual respect a healthy relationship requires to survive. Dr. Gottman's research showed this. When stonewalling became a chronic pattern, relationship satisfaction declined dramatically for both partners. The likelihood of long-term dissolution increased to near certainty. This meant the relationship would simply fall apart. Here is a distinction that matters enormously. It is a distinction that far too few people make clearly. There is a profound psychological and moral difference. This difference lies between withdrawing into silence as a weapon and taking space as a tool of A healthy person feeling overwhelmed in a conflict might say they need to take 20 minutes. This is to calm down before continuing the conversation. They then actually return to that conversation at the agreed time. They are not punishing their partner. They are not creating anxiety. They are managing their own emotional state. This allows them to engage more constructively. This approach is healthy. This is mature emotional regulation. The silent treatment, in its dark psychological form, does none of those things. There is no communication about why the silence is happening. No timeline is offered. There is no reassurance that the relationship is not in danger. There is just the disappearance. It is cold, unexplained, and deliberately sustained. This continues until the targeted person breaks. The difference is intent. One is self-care, the other is control. Now, let us spend some time understanding how the silent treatment functions. It works within the broader framework of psychological abuse. This is because it rarely travels alone. When the silent treatment is used as a genuine weapon, it almost always exists as part of a larger pattern. This is known as coercive control. Coercive control is a term used by psychologists and domestic violence specialists. It describes a systematic pattern of behaviors. An abuser uses these behaviors to dominate, monitor, isolate, and psychologically destabilize a partner. The silent treatment, in this context, is one tool in a broader arsenal. This arsenal might also include gaslighting, emotional manipulation, financial control, and social isolation. Constant criticism and deliberate attacks on self-esteem are also part of it. Gaslighting is particularly significant in this context. It often operates hand in hand with the silent treatment. Gaslighting makes someone question their own reality. This includes their memory, their judgment, and their sense of what happened. An abuser using the silent treatment might also deny it when directly confronted. They might reframe the situation. The victim's pain becomes the problem, not the abuser's behavior. They might claim the victim is too sensitive, or they might accuse the victim of starting the problem. Silence, combined with gaslighting, creates a psychological prison. The victim hurts. They are made to believe the pain is their own fault. They are made to believe their perception is distorted, and that they are the problem in the relationship. This is profound psychological cruelty. It leaves marks lasting far longer than the silent treatment itself. The long-term psychological consequences of chronic exposure to the silent treatment as abuse are serious. They are also extensively documented. Prolonged experiences of being silenced by a loved one lead to chronic anxiety. This is a state of hypervigilance. You are constantly scanning for signs that the silence is coming again. You constantly monitor the other person's mood. You are constantly walking on eggshells. This also leads to depression. Depression is a persistent sadness from existing in a relationship where you do not feel seen, valued, or safe. The silent treatment destroys its implicit message is that you are not worth speaking to. It tells you that you are not worth engaging with. It tells you that you are not worth the basic human courtesy of acknowledgement. Over time, that message burrows deep into how you see yourself. You begin to believe it. You begin to internalize the silence as evidence of your own inadequacy. In severe and prolonged cases, chronic emotional abuse from the silent treatment can produce symptoms. These are consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. These symptoms include hypervigilance and intrusive thoughts. A simple look or tone of voice can trigger a full-scale physiological alarm response. This happens because the nervous system has been conditioned. It recognizes early warning signs of incoming silence. This is not weakness, this is trauma. This is what the human nervous system does. It responds when subjected to repeated, unpredictable harm. This harm comes from a source it is also deeply bonded to. The body learns to prepare for the worst at all times. In that relationship, the worst can come at any moment and without warning. There is also an insidious social consequence. Many people do not talk about it enough. The silent treatment often coincides with increasing social isolation. This is especially true with a narcissistic or controlling partner. The abuser slowly severs the victim's connections to friends and family. This can happen through direct prohibition or by creating conflict. It also happens by emotionally depleting the victim. The victim becomes too focused on managing the abuser's moods to maintain outside relationships. This isolation makes everything worse. It removes external mirrors that could reflect a more accurate picture of the situation. Without friends, family, or external perspective, the victim's entire reality becomes the relationship. In that reality, the abuser's version of events goes completely unchallenged. Let us talk about something that surprises people. The person giving the silent treatment is not unaffected by it. There is a common assumption that the silent person is in power. People assume they feel fine. However, Kipling-Williams' research showed something more complicated and interesting. Humans are biologically wired for social reciprocity. It goes against our fundamental nature to ignore someone seeking connection. Therefore, the person giving the silent treatment must actively work against their own instincts. They do this to maintain the silence. They must keep reminding themselves of all their reasons for anger. They repeatedly justify their behavior to themselves. They must sustain a state of active hostility and negative thinking. This keeps the silence going. Williams described this process as psychological quicksand. He noted that most people never intend for it to last so long. However, once involved, it becomes increasingly difficult to step out. The longer the silence lasts, the more the ego becomes invested. It becomes harder to break the silence without feeling like a loss. The silent treatment traps both the giver and the receiver. The silent treatment has a particularly tragic dimension as a relational dynamic. It destroys both people and the relationship itself. A study of over 500 couples found significantly less relationship satisfaction. This occurred when partners used emotional withdrawal as a conflict strategy. The damage accumulates. Each episode of silence erodes a little more of the trust and intimacy. It also erodes the sense that the relationship is safe and values both people. Relationships with chronic silent treatment patterns do not survive indefinitely. They either end in formal separation or they calcify into a living arrangement. In this arrangement, two people coexist in permanent emotional distance. The warmth and connection of a true partnership drain away. It is replaced by a cold, functional truce that neither person finds fulfilling. Now, here is something very important. People in this situation desperately need to hear it. There are signs to tell you if the silence is a communication failure that can be worked through, or it could be abuse that you need to protect yourself from. If the silent treatment is used to punish you when you express a boundary, that is a sign. This is also a sign when you say no, or advocate for your own needs. It is a sign if the silence only lifts when you have capitulated. This means you have apologized regardless of your actions. It is a sign if you have given in to what the other person wanted. If you constantly question your own reality, that is the signal. This includes wondering if you are imagining the pattern. It is a sign if you feel responsible for the silence, even when you logically know you did nothing wrong. If the silence comes with other controlling behaviors, that is also a sign. These controlling behaviors might include monitoring your movements. They might also include isolating you from your support network. Controlling finances or making you feel afraid of their reactions are also signs. These are signs that you are not with someone who struggles to communicate. You are with a person who uses a systematic, deliberate pattern of behavior to control you. So, what can you do? First, and most urgently, stop blaming yourself. This is perhaps the hardest psychological task. The entire silent treatment is designed to make you believe you are the problem. It makes you think if you were only different, the silence would not happen. That is not the truth. The silent treatment is a choice made by the person delivering it. It is their behavior, belonging entirely to them. This is true regardless of anything you did or did not do. Your inability to fix it does not mean you are inadequate. It means you are using tools not designed for this repair. You cannot resolve the silent treatment through more compliance, apology, or resolution. If possible, comes through clear, firm communication. This communication should be about how it affects you. It should also be about what you need from the relationship. Setting and maintaining boundaries is essential. Clearly tell the person how the silent treatment affects you. Use language that centers your own experience. For example, state that when they stop speaking, you feel terrified and worthless. Explain that you need a different way to handle conflict. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are also not manipulations. They are honest statements of what you can and cannot accept. This applies to a relationship claiming to be based on love and respect. However, boundaries only work when you are genuinely prepared to enforce them. A boundary you never enforce teaches the other person a lesson. It teaches them there are no consequences for crossing it. Prioritize rebuilding your sense of self. People who experience chronic silent treatment often find their identity slowly erode. This is due to constant anxiety and relentless reconnecting with your true self outside the relationship is not a luxury. This includes your values, strengths, friendships, and passions. It is a psychological necessity. Lean on your support network. These people can reflect a reality that the relationship may have distorted. Do not let pride or shame keep you from reaching out. Ask the people who love you for the grounding and perspective they can provide. Seek professional support. There is no shame in working with a therapist or counselor. Look for one with experience in emotional abuse and trauma-informed care. Chronic emotional abuse through the silent treatment causes significant damage. This damage includes anxiety, depression, erosion of self-worth, and trauma responses. Most people cannot simply think their way out of these on their own. Therapy provides a space to process what happened to you. A skilled professional can help. They can help you untangle distorted beliefs left behind by the experience. You can then begin to rebuild the psychological foundation that the silent treatment worked so hard to destroy. Sometimes, the healthiest, most courageous, and most psychologically sound thing you can do is leave. This is not always the case, but it is sometimes true. There are relationships where the pattern is too entrenched. The behavior is too deliberate. The person using silence as a weapon has no genuine interest in changing. In those relationships, staying does not fix anything. It only lengthens your exposure to the harm. Leaving, in such situations, is not giving up. It is choosing yourself. It is choosing your mental health, your dignity, and your future. This choice is made over the false hope that someone will one day choose differently. This is someone who has repeatedly chosen to weaponize silence. Kipling Williams studied this phenomenon for 36 years. He shared a profound insight. In the end, he stated, the silent treatment says more about the person doing it. This is true whether it lasts for hours or for decades. It says more than it does about the person receiving it. Consider this deeply. The silent treatment is not a reflection of your worth. It is not a measurement of how lovable, intelligent, or valuable you are. It does not define what kind of person you are. Instead, it reflects the emotional immaturity, insecurity, and need for control of the person who chooses it. In many cases, it also reflects their cruelty. You did not earn it. You do not deserve it. You are not responsible for ending it by destroying yourself in the process. Real love does not use silence as a weapon. Real love does not erase you when you refuse to comply. Real love does not make your presence conditional. It does not suggest your worth as something you must constantly reach. Real love communicates. Real love shows up even in hard conversations. It shows up in difficult moments. This is true, even when pride would rather retreat into silence. Real love respects your humanity enough to acknowledge that you exist. This is true, not only when you are convenient. It is true, not only when you are compliant, but always. Any relationship that does not offer you that most basic human dignity works against you. It does not work for you. The silence made you question your reality. It made you beg for attention. It also made you apologize for things you did not do. That silence was never about you. It was always about their need to control what they could not otherwise control. Understanding that is crucial. Truly understanding it at a level deeper than intellectual acknowledgement is the beginning of your healing. Your healing is the only thing that matters now. You are seen. You are heard. Your actual, full, complex, unsilenced, human voice matters. Do not let anyone ever take that from you again.